Loki Season 2 Episode 3 just gave us the true villain of this series, and it's not Kang the Conqueror, but also it gave us a new hero, which isn't Loki. Plus, it gave us some more branch timeline stuff, and Dox's plan was a complete failure because it did not stop the timelines from growing, because they just keep coming, because when you got the multiverse and so many possibilities, of course it's just gonna go and go and go and go, unless you're just constantly pruning them like they once did. But this episode, even though it was longer than the first two episodes, it did a great job not feeling stretched out. It had some cool stuff when it came to the old-timey stuff because they were in 1893, which I thought was really interesting because they played along with it. All the music during this episode was like the Loki theme music, but in an old-timey way with that piano and everything else. One of the things I was kind of surprised by, it showed more of Sylvie's humanity and where she's coming from, showing that she does have restraint because she doesn't kill Victor timely when she has the chance and takes a step back to Loki to take him because she realizes this is not the same man who is He Who Remains. But we'll talk more about that when we get to that part of the episode. And the one thing this episode did was show how evil Miss Minutes is. Because of the fact that she is an AI, she is one crazy one at that. And I think she could possibly be worse than Ultron. Plus, it was just a good time watching Loki use his powers because it's kind of cool just to have, a superhero show with the superhero doing superhero things, which is one of those things I've had a problem with other shows in the past, even with DC. Sometimes you're watching the episode and even though they have powers, they don't use it once during it. So I like how they're incorporating Loki's mischief and his magic into this. But let's talk about the branch timeline and what Renslayer did, because she went to 1868 on the sacred timeline in Chicago, all to meet Miss Minutes, and this all happened directly after she kicks the shit out of Mobius back in episode 6 of the previous season. So we're pretty much just going back in time to figure out what happened during that, because right after that, she meets with Miss Minutes to go over what He Who Remains plan was, and that was to give Victor timely the TVA manual so that he could start the TVA sooner. But by doing that, it created a branch timeline, because when Mobius and Loki go to 1893, it's now a branch timeline, and they state that in the title card, which is pretty interesting that He Who Remains' plan was to change the timeline by giving a variant of himself the TVA book, which could technically fast track the TVA, but by doing that, you have now had some unforeseen circumstances that could come from it, which in this episode we'll dive deeper into when we get to that whole section with Victor Timely and where he went by the end of it. One of the interesting things I like what they did with this episode is because they went to 1893, the Chicago World Fair, which in our actual history is when that fair started. Then when Loki and Mobius are walking around, there's 3 Asgard wood statues where you got Thor, Odin, and Balder the Brave, which in the comics is one of Thor's brothers. And I find it funny that Loki's like, why is he included? No one knows about him, which is kind of a joke because originally Marvel was going to introduce him in Multiverse of Madness, played by Daniel Craig, but there was some conflicts and they ended up changing him for Mr. Fantastic. They see a sign where I'm pretty sure it says Kang on it, but it sets up everything that goes on with Victor Timely because they go to that show, which is the post-credit scene from Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, where Loki sees him and gets freaked out. But he's clearly not the same person as He Who Remains because he seems a little bit more stuttery, he's a little awkward, and he doesn't seem so menacing, which is probably what happened because Renslayer and Miss Minutes created a branch timeline. This Kang never became that confident self. He became someone who tweaked and kind of did his own little experiments by himself, which is probably why he became Victor Timely, which in the comics in 1901, the brilliant industrialist and inventor Victor Timely founded the town of Timely in Wisconsin, which is where his lab was in this episode, was in Wisconsin, which was a nice nod to that. Which in the comics too, Victor Timely was Kang the Conqueror who went back in time after he was forced to flee from the Avengers. And he transformed his city into a technological marvel, but behind closed door, of course, he's doing some nefarious things for his future conquests. So I thought this was a cool reference using him as a variant of himself in the 1800s, because in the comics, Kang the Conqueror, all the variants are pretty much from the future who go back in time to become these different people. They don't start there. So this was a nice change from everything, but also showing that we might see other Kang variants who are from the past rather than the future. And like I said before, this Kang seems like a good person because he creates Loom, and his whole pitch is that he wants to create light and power for the entire planet. Of course, it seems like kind of a scam because all his inventions fail, but I like how they're kind of setting that up where this Kang might not be that bad. But also, he is useful, and Mobius points out, because they could just use him and his temporal energy to open up the blast doors because he would have the same one as He Who Remains because he's a variant. Also, one of the guys at the show offers him $1,000 for the machine, which in that time is a lot of money. That's why the first guy said 25 bucks. That's a pretty penny there, but 1,000 would make you rich in that time. But then nowadays, $1,000 is literally nothing in our reality, which really sucks. When Mr. Timely is also running away when everyone finds out he's kind of a fraud, he runs by an Egyptian exhibit at the fair, which makes me think it's a Rama Tut reference, which is another version of Kang. The whole running part of this episode also leads to Sylvie coming to try to kill Victor because he's a variant of He Who Remains, and the fact that Renslayer and Loki kind of went to him forced Sylvie's hand. She was gonna leave him alone, he was innocent, he wasn't doing anything, but because he was given the TVA handbook and Loki seemed to have a part in it, she realized she has to step in to stop him because he could become the threat she's worried about. But I like how they kind of point this, that she has a lot of humanity in this episode, because she's like, I won't get any joy out of killing him, showing that she doesn't really want to do it, but she feels like she has to prevent this big threat from taking over and controlling everything once again and making her feel like she has to run, which I really like, because by the end of the episode you see her turn around after seeing this man cry on the ground, saying that he's not the man she thinks he is, he's a different person, and it makes her kind of realize that this isn't the same guy. This guy seems like he's half decent. He might not be that bad, which is why I think he might be a secret hero in this, and that he might be one of the good Kangs rather than this evil variant. And I'm very curious to see what they're gonna do, because they kind of push Sylvie to look like she's taking care of this weaponized person, but by the end realizing she was in the wrong and that this guy was innocent. And I think in the end, she might end up protecting him more from any harm that might come to him. You could also really see Renslayer trying to turn Victor into like her partner in crime, trying to get him to work with her because she wants to have this power and control as well. Because constantly during this episode, she's talking about order and wanting to make sure everything stays in order and it's not complete chaos, which is why she wants to control the timeline to go forward. She thinks she's doing something good when she's not. I think that's also because she's so brainwashed from He Who Remains. She's so focused on this order that she was put in charge of originally, where now that's all she can think of, and it's kind of hard for her to move past it. But I think some events will probably happen, but we'll talk about those theories by the end. But back to her trying to manipulate Victor to get him on her side by telling her that Loki helped murder his variant, showing that Loki isn't a good guy. Even though he didn't really help, he tried to stop Sylvie. Renslayer doesn't actually know that and is trying to twist it to make it so that it makes it look like Loki is the bad guy. And when Renslayer did say she wanted to have that partnership with him, Miss Minutes is the real villain who convinces Victor to get rid of her, making it because no one else can be in this partnership with Victor Timely except Miss Minutes. And the reason why is because Miss Minutes is a complete crazy AI, which is so much worse than Ultron. You see that she's talking about how she was worried that Victor would like Ramona more than her, how she was a simple AI who was just around to play chess with He Who Remains, but eventually got the ability to write her own program, which is not a good thing. Don't let AIs write their own program, because shit like this will happen. And the thing is, she is definitely worse than Ultron because she's had years and years to develop, more experience, stronger, knows more knowledge. And if she gets a physical body, she could be unstoppable, and that's what she wants. All she wants to do is have a real body and be loved by Kang the Conqueror, and she wants to be his GF. This is the thing that I think is pointing towards that Miss Minutes will be the main villain. And honestly, she could be a potential villain for an Avengers movie, because if this character gets out of this alive, she might be going after the multiverse and finding herself a Kang that will love her. And this is a real threat. I wonder if maybe she will team up with another OP version of Ultron, so you got two AIs who are stupidly strong that people have to stop. But before we get into the end of the episode and the crazy AI, let's talk about Renslayer coming in to kind of take control of the mission after she was ditched. It makes it look like she's gonna prune Victor for a second until Loki and Sylvie come in to stop her, but I'm actually shocked that Sylvie kind of saved the day for a second. It did make it look like Sylvie only stopped Renslayer from doing what she was about to do so that she could be the one to kill Victor. But this is where we get into that whole scene where I was saying that you could see her humanity by not killing this man who wasn't the same one as He Who Remains, and it was someone different, someone more innocent. And I like how that led to her telling Loki to take Victor with him, showing that she trusts Loki to do the right thing. I think she's kind of realizing that Loki isn't the one manipulating things from behind the scenes, and that he's actually just trying to keep people alive, because he's trying to keep all these branched timelines. He's trying to fix the loom so that the TVA doesn't get destroyed, multiverse war doesn't happen, but at the same time, he's not going to be pruning all those timelines to prevent that. So showing he's trying to find another way to deal with this war and to stop all these Kangs from coming. And I really like how Sylvie kicks Renslayer to the end of time where He Who Remains body is, showing that it's deteriorated since they killed him last season and everything's kind of falling apart. His body's starting to deteriorate, but also showing that Miss Minutes is going to team up with Renslayer right now and I don't think she's gonna team up with her for the whole time. I think she's gonna betray her at some point because of how crazy Miss Minutes is and how she wants to be with Kang. So she's probably just gonna use Renslayer until she can do that. The one thing they point out in this is that Miss Minutes feels betrayed by Victor by mentioning it was a bad thing to cross her because she knows all of He Who Remains secrets, which kind of points out that she might know all of Kang's secrets. So possible different reality versions of him because of the War of Kang. She might know a lot more than we actually know of, and it could turn her into a pretty hard villain to stop. And she knows secrets about Renslayer that would make her really angry. And the thing is that this section's probably teasing Renslayer finding out what her past is, which it could tie into her comic book origin, where she's from the 40th century and that Kang was the one that conquered her kingdom and then took her out of it. So that could be a tie to her actual comic book storyline. Like, they did show that she was from the Sacred Timeline as a teacher, but I feel like with the way Miss Minutes presented this, that it could just be a lie, which could have been set up by Kang by erasing her memories, putting her there, making her a teacher for a bit, then taking her out again so she wouldn't remember her past that was the future. So I'm really curious to see what her character does there, because my theory is that I don't think that she's going to be a villain. I think that Miss Minutes is probably going to betray her, and then Renslayer is going to have to come back, help the rest of the TVA, because she realizes Miss Minutes doesn't want order. She wants control. And Renslayer will probably realize that Mobius and Loki are actually trying to save people's lives and somewhat have order rather than having all these possible variants going around and causing destruction. And I also think Miss Minutes is going to be the main villain of this series because of her obsession with Kang. She wants to be with him. She wants a real body. I feel like by the end of this season, she's probably going to get a real body, and she could potentially be a huge villain for one of the Avenger movies. There's no way we're just going to get Kang and Kang for Secret Wars and Kang Dynasty. I feel like Miss Minutes could be that either main or secondary villain that pushes the story along, and the characters have to team up to fight. Because look how strong Ultron was in the What If series. If Miss Minutes gets that strong, it's going to take a lot of them to take her down. So I'm really curious to see what happens there. Let me know if you have any of your own theories about what's going on with this character and what might happen with Renslayer, and if Victor Timely might be a good guy. I feel like they're setting up some interesting things. I mean, there's only 6 episodes in the series, so there's only so much they can do, but I'm really excited to see how this series plays out, because it has definitely been better than some of the previous Marvel series in the last couple of years. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my Loki videos, as well as all my DC breakdowns as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next week when we watch episode 4 of Loki Season 2.